Sachin, just to start, like, just how do you reflect on the season as a whole, what you accomplished during the regular season, and maybe the strides you made there, maybe accompanied with the disappointment and how it ended?
Yeah, I think right now it's still pretty raw, and so there is quite a bit of disappointment. Been meeting with players all morning, exit interviews, and yeah, we all expected to still be playing right now, and so there is disappointment. But yeah, as we reflect back, I think there's a lot to be proud of. We doubled our win total from last year, exceeded preseason expectations by double-digit wins, and our goal was to make the playoffs, and we did that, and we felt like we gave Memphis a run, and so and there's a lot to continue to build on too. That's also the exciting part, and there's a lot of optimism too as we look forward. Ant and Jaden, 20, 21 years old, those guys still have a lot of room to grow. And there's also clear areas for us to improve in and grow in terms of development and maturity. So there's a lot of excitement, and also this will be the first summer, normal summer, over the past few years given COVID. So for those two guys in particular, Ant and Jaden, they haven't had a normal summer yet. So I think this will be a big summer for them and for everyone to continue growing. And now, we've all gotten a taste of it. And so there's a hunger, which, I can really feel as Coach and I sat with everyone today. And so, yeah, we're excited. We're excited for a big summer.
In terms of the foundation that is here, do you view whatever happens this summer in terms of changes to the roster, does this team need significant changes to kind of take the next step, or do you see more of a core in place and pruning around the edges? How would you describe, like, what needs to be done to carry it forward now?
Yeah, we'll take a closer look, but I don't think it's significant changes, and this season I feel like has been a success, but our goal was, like I said, was to make the playoffs, but the expectations change now, and we want more now. But the great thing about it is, with this roster, is I don't think this roster has hit its ceiling. We didn't hit our ceiling to get to this point to achieve our goal. There's still so much room to grow. So no, I think there is the core foundation here for us to work with.
You got Coach Finch done with an extension earlier, right before the playoffs started. What kind of conversations have you had with ownership here about your situation, and what are your expectations going forward in terms of how that is going to shake out?
I won't comment on that, but I'm in this role now, and it's a big summer for us, and I'm focused entirely on that. And Coach and I and our staffs are excited to put this team together for a bigger year next year.
How do you? Coach Finch kind of talked a lot about how a playoff series can expose weaknesses, show strengths. How do you evaluate and weigh a 6-game playoff series versus a body of work from a regular season in evaluating this team and making decisions going forward?
Yeah, I think there's a balance. For sure, in a playoff series, I agree with Coach. Your weaknesses do really get exposed, but at the same time, you don't want to overweigh a specific matchup issue that may only be or an issue that's exacerbated by a specific matchup. But in this case, I do think there were many issues that are probably generic, that don't apply just to the matchup with Memphis, that just confirmed sort of issues that we've seen through the regular season.
Kind of along those lines, D'Lo didn't have a great playoff series or played up to maybe his standard. He's talked wanting an extension perhaps before the season. He came in viewing this as a contract year. Kind of how do you evaluate his season and his fit moving forward?
I thought D'Lo had a great year, and he's been a big part of the success that we had. You know, not just on the offensive end. I thought he made big strides defensively too, and in the new scheme that Coach implemented, I think really took advantage of his strengths, and we wouldn't be here without his contributions. You know, in the play-in game, we wouldn't have won that game without him. And so, yeah, he's been a big part of our success.
You talked about like the issues in the playoffs matched up pretty well with the shortcomings in the regular season, the ones the team had. So knowing what the issues kind of are, do you see those as mostly solvable through growth within this roster here, or maybe things that have to be addressed via roster tinkering? Yeah,
I think there's a mix of both. You know, of course, we had those leads in several games which we weren't able to hold on to. I think some of that, you know, maybe there's some maturity that we can grow internally, you know, especially as, you know, having this experience under our belts. But, you know, defensive rebounding was obviously a big issue in this series and all year long, and that may be a little bit more of a personnel thing, and, you know, more size can certainly help. But, yeah, I think there's a mix of both for sure in terms of how we can address some of those areas, weaknesses just with development and internal growth, and others that we may have to address with the roster.
Not a lot of cap space again this year, but is there a sense of urgency to get creative to try to make this team as good as it possibly can be heading into next season, or are you okay seeing like, well, let's see how things develop and how things look next year with a lot of these guys just trying to make personal growth?
You know, I think that there's a long road here, and so you know, we don't want to just sit back and see how it grows. You know, we'll take advantage of opportunities as they come, and we'll try to improve this roster. Like I said, the expectations are different now, and so we really want to take that next step. But at the same time, we're not going to be looking to make any short-term moves at the cost of the future, given how bright the future could be.
You mentioned size. In addition to size, you have one of the least brawny rosters in the NBA, and I'm wondering, it seemed to limit what types of defense you could play throughout the course of the season, and that hurt you guys at various times. Is there a way to address that fundamentally within the resources that you have and the cap space you have, or do you think you may have to go above the luxury tax to address it effectively?
I think so. You know, we'll have to take a closer look at that. Throughout the year, you know, we did try to implement different defensive schemes, but you know, we were very effective in the high wall, and that was the right scheme in this series as well. And I thought it was effective. It was ultimately the rebounding that hurt us. But for sure, the more tools that you can add to your belt is going to be helpful, yeah, we'll try to address those, and you know, we can get better at those internally as well with the group that we have. But for sure, adding different skill sets will help as well.
Sachin, as the season went on, the aggression with which Karl was doubled and teams tried to take him away increased over time. As someone who can impact this roster and change it, how do you go about thinking about that issue and the ways that you can resolve that with personnel?
I think there are multiple ways to resolve that. I'm not losing a ton of sleep over that. I think you know, I think we made some progress in, you know, I believe Karl is such a unique player with such a wide skill set, and I think there are lots of different ways to put him in positions to succeed. but more shooting around him, quicker decision making. I think there are ways that we can resolve that.
And then with Jalen Noel and Naz Reid, they have very unique contract situations. Does the nature of those contracts make it so you need to make a decision on them earlier in the offseason, or does the nature of those contracts make it so maybe you have to be a little bit more patient to make other adjustments before addressing those two?
It gives us flexibility, knowing that those guys are under contract allows us to plan, but gives us a chance to think of other ways to plan for our cap going forward. Yeah, it is helpful having those guys under those contracts with those team options.
Pat, Carl, Ant, Vando, everyone who spoke this morning talked about the brotherhood and the camaraderie of this specific unit. Is that something you noticed as well, being so close to the team all year?
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that's been a big part of the success of this group. And I've mentioned to several guys, in our sit-downs today, there have been a lot of guys who've had different roles throughout the year. J.O. was a starter at the start of the year, and by the end of the year was not in the rotation. J-Mac, TP, different guys at different times were out of the rotation, and every single guy handled that with so much maturity and professionalism and put the team first. And that's one of the things I'm most proud about this team, and I think that's been a big part of the success.
Looking forward, as you study Ant's arc and future trajectory, is it as a play initiator and as well a playmaker, a scorer, but also somebody who lessens the load on a point guard on your team, or perhaps broadens that point guard's role away from play initiation?
I think yes, but I think that he has a flexibility of doing both. He can be with another creator, he can be a finisher, but I think he'll continue to grow into that role as having the ability to create, not just for himself, but for others as well. And that's going to be the next growth for him, is thinking the game, in knowing when to drive and kick, and knowing where the open man's going to be. So yeah, that's sort of where his real upside lies, but certainly has the versatility to play in different roles in that way.
We've seen certain opponents in which the high wall really wasn't feasible. Memphis just didn't seem like they were one of them. Pat talked about, as far as adding more versatility in schemes, that it just comes down to personnel and the ability to do that moving forward. Would you like to get this roster to the point where you can have 5 capable defenders out there for the bulk of games?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately you want perfect players at every position. There's no player that's perfect, so you're always going to be, trading off one thing for something else. And so it all depends on what those trade-offs are. Of course, you'd love to have a team full of the most versatile defensive players that can play any defensive scheme, that can shoot, pass, dribble, and rebound. But no one like that exists. So it's all a question of trade-offs. But of course, that's something that you'd love to have.
With Carl and D'Lo, and then Ant and Jaden, there's about a 5-ish year age gap there between them. Can there kind of timelines of when they are peaking and rising as NBA players coexist, and kind of can those timelines just mesh together, do you think, long term?
I think so. Yeah, I think that's a great question, a very relevant question. But I think we're seeing signs that they can, with the way Ant and Jaden have developed this year. With Jaden, I think it was so great to see him come back from that ankle injury, and he worked hard to come back from that quickly. He was able to come back before the end of the regular season and then really contribute in the playoffs, and then to have the game that he did last night was really great to see, and is something for him to continue to build on. But yeah, no, I think both of those guys, their trajectory is heading in the right direction, and our veteran players are, just entering their prime, and they've got many years ahead as well. So I do believe that those timelines can coexist.
You've spoken this season about how you really work in lockstep with Chris Finch. How helpful is it for you to have such a positive relationship with the head coach coming into a summer where you have nearly a handful of picks and you can be pretty aggressive in a creative way?
It's everything. It's so important for me, for us. Both of us truly view this as a partnership. I've said that many times. He'll have incredible input into what we do this summer. We'll sit down and talk through the roster and debrief on the whole season. And likewise during the year, whenever I have input, he's wide open. I've sat in on coaches meetings. He and his staff are more than welcome to sit in on draft meetings. So it's a wide open. There's in some ways there's no wall. In some ways there's almost no distinction between coaching staff and front office staff. We're all in this together.
Coach Finch, even Pat, talked about how the West might be even better next year as teams get healthy. Does the fact that you might have to be even better to be just as successful this year impact the approach this offseason?
I think that's right. We've talked about that, and it's something, another factor to drive our guys this summer to put in that extra work, because staying the same is not gonna, or is gonna mean that we're gonna fall back. Just given, like you said, the Clippers, Denver, and other teams that are continuing to grow and get better, we've got to take 2 steps forward while other teams take 1 step forward. Thank you, guys. Thanks for